We've all been in those situations where you have presented something to management or to stakeholders or to some sort of collaborating group, and maybe it's a new idea or a new project, a new product, a new feature, and you think that you've got an agreement on what the way to go forward is. But then a few weeks later, you discover that actually they've got some new objections or some new problems, or they just weren't as committed as we thought they were, or they're doing something different to what we thought they committed to do. And it turns out that we have to go back to the start and reconvince them and persuade them again. Now, what's happening here is that in that meeting where we do this original agreement, we're in persuasion mode. We have a presentation and we're trying to persuade someone to agree with us. At the same time, when you have a presentation, people's brains aren't always engaged. They're sort of like passive consumption. They're not necessarily thinking through everything. And you're leading them down a very specific path of like, these are the issues, and you're choosing what to present and what not to present. And they know that that's happening. So some people will go into salesperson and buyer mode, and there'll be objections and sort of that sort of criticism. Other people will go into a sort of conflict-averse mode where I don't want to disagree too much. So generally, I'll raise some issues, raise some concerns, and then we'll generally kind of agree and we'll move on. But it's soft commitment. And what's happened is this commitment is not exactly what you think it is. It's just, I don't generally disagree, and we'll continue on with this and we'll go that way. Even if you write it down in minutes afterwards, because who reads their meeting minutes anyway? Very few people, in my experience. So instead of doing this, what I recommend you do is write a document, write a one-pager about the issue that you want to discuss, and write it in neutral terms. Like, this is the problem that we're trying to solve, and these are the issues to discuss, and these are the decisions we want to make. Now, when you have this written down in a sort of a very black and white form, first of all, people read it. And if it's a good document, it's going to have most of the issues surfaced there, and people will read it and think about it and engage their brains. Reading is a much more mentally active activity than watching a presentation. So you engage their brains in thinking through the issues. They then will discuss this, and because it's a document as opposed to you presenting something, it's no longer persuasion mode. It's no longer this adversarial sort of thing. It's more of a let's collaborate to solve this problem that you're expressing here on the paper. So now we're collaborating to solve the problem, and we're working through this. And what happens in these kinds of meetings is that you have a much more difficult conversation because you're discussing the real concrete issues, the real the hard parts of the problem, especially if you've written a good document which does actually surface those hard discussions and those genuine objections. But at the end of the meeting, because you have it written down and you have the decisions to make written down, you get a much more concrete decision, a much more hard commitment out of what we want to do and how we want to go forward. Now, if this is something that's a new product or a new feature or a new idea, it's often really good to start from the customer and write this down as a dear customer letter or a press release that starts from the customer's perspective, because that's neutral ground. That's not something that is my area or your area when we're in an organization. It's not my silo or your silo. It's the customer. So we both feel out of our comfort zone, and we go into the neutral territory of the customer, and we collaborate to solve this issue from the customer's perspective. And now we're not only are we not being persuaded, we're in neutral territory collaborating to solve an issue together. It's all written down on paper, so it's concrete. And then we make a commitment. And the commitment, because it's something that's written down on paper, is much more hard, much more sticky. And it generally tends to result in the actions that we agreed actually happening.